Again, welcome to Quarantine Coffee Hour. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Derek Pratt, the educator at the Erie Canal Museum, and I'm joined today by John Montague of the Buffalo Maritime Center. Okay, sound is good. Yay. So I guess we'll just quickly repeat what we said at the start here. So John, want to introduce yourself a little?
Okay, yes, I'm John Montague of the Buffalo Maritime Center, and for those of you who don't know about the Buffalo Maritime Center in the center part of the state, whatever, we're a community intergenerational learning center focused on maritime subjects and history. We have outreach programs, we do historic boats and so forth. Building boats, replicas, one of our specialties, it seems. And this Seneca Chief project fits perfectly into our project list. We're happy to share this with the other people along the canal, particularly the canal towns. And I want to thank you, Derek, for setting this up. I think it's a wonderful idea to do this, and I think particularly for the pandemic sufferers, this is a good way to kind of communicate and stay in touch with each other.
Yes, yeah, thanks for that. And we're having a great time doing it. That reminds me, for those of you who are joining us, please say hello in the comments. Tell us where you're coming from. We've had people I know from all over the country have been joining us, and all along the canal and throughout the state, and we love seeing where everyone's from. And be sure to share this on your Facebook pages. I think some people might have gotten lost in our confusion at the beginning, but hopefully not too many. And thanks for joining us again. As always, got my recess coffee. Remember to buy local in my Dunder Mifflin mug. It's a fun show on Netflix, The Office. Who knows? Maybe you've heard of it. Everyone's heard of it. Okay, well, good. People are getting back to us. So we've got 24 viewers now. So without further ado, since we're starting a little late here, I'll get to John. We got someone from North Tonawanda here, Dennis Reed. Welcome.
Good. Yep. Good. All right. All right. Well, let me just jump right into this. This is a talk on the designing and constructing of a replica of DeWitt Clinton's Seneca Chief. The Seneca Chief was the boat that DeWitt Clinton opened the Erie Canal with in 1825, started in Buffalo, went all the way down to Albany into New York City, and that was really the boat on which they did the wetting of the waters. So it's very significant in terms of the history of the Erie Canal, and particularly important to Buffalo. The boat was designed and built by a Buffalonian, a new Buffalonian. Almost everyone in Buffalo was new. There weren't that many people here, and everybody had just arrived from somewhere east. The man who designed the boat and built the boat was a fellow by the name of Thaddeus Joy. And Thaddeus Joy was not only the builder of the boat, but a friend of DeWitt Clinton's, and he actually captained the boat when the flotilla went down to New York City for the wetting of the waters. Very significant man in Buffalo. He also is the one who started the dock, the commercial wharf. He built other boats, schooners and so forth for the lake service and so on. So that's the boat. We have, what I want to do today is to kind of show some of the issues that we've had to deal with in constructing this and why we're doing it. For one, it's extremely significant to the city of Buffalo, and this has been, the Buffalo Maritime Center has been heavily involved in promoting the harbor of Buffalo. When I got here some 30 some years ago, came to Buffalo, it was quite a different harbor front. The city had turned its back on the harbor for many, many years and just began to kind of rediscover it. And we're kind of well on our way to doing that now. One of the things that happened over the last 20 years or so was the watering of sections of the Erie Canal, the redigging and discovery and redigging of the commercial slip, which was actually the terminus of the Erie Canal. And that's what you're looking at on the screen right now. And kind of moving the naval ships around and really beginning to think about the harbor as an asset rather than just sort of a back door. The Maritime Center, for the many years that we've been in existence in one form or another, we've been very involved in promoting this idea of the harbor, recognizing that the city's on the water. As we've approached the, and this goes back to almost 20 years, approaching the bicentennial of the Erie Canal, we sort of recognize that this spot, what you're actually looking at right here, if you can see my cursor here, this is actually the terminus of the Erie Canal. This is where the East Coast meets the Midwest. This is actually, we like to say, it's a sacred site. It's more important really than the archway to the west in St. Louis. This is a significant point because this is the place where literally the East Coast of the United States, the 13 colonies, broke through to the Midwest and the rest of it, of course, all the way to California. So this was a very significant spot, and there are very few places where you can actually draw a circle around where it happened, and this is it. This is where it happened, right here. There were other canals later that the Prime Slip and other entries and so forth, but this specific spot is very significant. So we have, over the years, tried to kind of promote this. We did probably about 20 different permutations of and visionary plans and so forth of how this area could be developed. This is one we did about 10, maybe 10, 15 years ago, trying to reconstruct some of the types of buildings that would have been along the canal at that time. The Naval Park building, which is over here on the right, is actually an imitation of the Coit building, which was one of the early buildings in the harbor. But part of that was that not just building the infrastructure around the canal and kind of trying to create the urban ambiance of what Buffalo looked like in the canal days, but we thought, well, you know, really what we need are some canal boats. So as early as 1997, we did a proposal for building a canal boat in the harbor to be permanently stationed there. And when I did this drawing, I said, well, why not a couple of canal boats? In fact, we still like this idea to have a whole series of them. So when you look at that commercial slip, you don't just see, you know, plastic motorboats in there, but you see something that kind of pulls you back into the atmosphere of the canal, or the ambiance of the canal. So we started a number of years ago to do images of this, to try to give people some visual grasp of what this was like. Oftentimes, even in Buffalo, you ask people, or people ask about the Erie Canal. Is there still an Erie Canal? Where does the Erie Canal go? Or I thought they filled that in. Well, only in the middle of Syracuse did they do that. Anyway, but no, it's still there. You can go all the way to Albany. You can still go on the barge canal, the latest permutation of this. So there's a lot of misinformation and ignorance about the canal, and particularly about the canal's significance. So this was something
in Syracuse, though, folks.
Sorry,
folks should definitely check out the filled section in Syracuse, though.
Yeah.
Yes. By the Waylock building.
Yeah. So we started doing images and trying to, just as part of our general kind of educational policy and so forth, to kind of introduce these ideas. We were very much inspired by Dr. Robert Hager from Chittenango, I guess from Syracuse, but he worked with Chittenango, and some of the early drawings that he had done, the speculative drawings of what Erie Canal boats, particularly packet boats, looked like. I did this painting way back when, based on those designs and so forth. We've since developed some more, I think, images that are a little bit closer to what original boats are. We're still waiting for some, hopefully for some archaeological evidence to come in to help us with that. But the idea was that we wanted to use the canal boat as a focus for the harbor. And what I think is really significant about this is that from a general sort of historical and even current urban planning point of view, is it gives the canal and recognition of the canal gives Buffalo an identity. I mean, it tells you who are they, why is Buffalo here, why is it, why is it what it is, how did its history, where did its history come from? And you really need to understand the canal to appreciate that. And that's certainly true of every single city on the canal, Rochester, Syracuse, Gasport, all the little towns strung out kind of like a necklace across the state really owe their origins to the Erie Canal. So our project that we're working on, building the Seneca Chief, is really part of a larger project to promote the idea of the Erie Canal. And I'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but when we finish the project of building this Seneca Chief replica, it's an integral part of our plan to take the boat down the canal and use the boat as a kind of a cheerleader for the canal and an inspiration to other towns, almost a kind of showboat that will move up and down the canal. And of course, it will be the perfect photo op for anybody passing through town or seeing their towns in the context of the Erie Canal. And as many of you know, of course, a lot of the towns, of course, as the Erie Canal became less and less significant for them, they basically turned their backs on the canal. But this would also help promote turning those cities back in the direction where they originally developed. So that's part of a long range scheme. What I want to look at first is the research into the Seneca Chief. So the Seneca Chief was, as we know, was built in 1825. We found, in fact, we started out building a boat which was 65 feet long because that seemed to be what our research had showed us what the boat should be. And kind of in the 11th hour discovered, no, it's 74 feet long. So we had to add a center section to it. Didn't cause any problems, but so I should emphasize that in our research, we're still doing research, even though we are starting to construct the boat right now and we're lofting it and so forth. We are still open to new information that comes in, archaeological information, visual information, and so on. There are a number of problems with research of boats, particularly from this period. This is 1825. And generally speaking, in boats of this size, of this scale, and even some very large ships, ocean-going sailboats, schooners, square riggers, and so forth, were not built with plans. They're not built with plans in the traditional way that we think today, where you have a measured plan and you have set offsets and so forth, and you construct the boat. They were built, generally speaking, by sort of rule of thumb procedures, like a lot of farmhouses and barns and so forth. You didn't need plans for that. You just pace it off. You kind of lay it out. You start building, and the skill of the builders kind of knew what the next thing to do was going to be, how to measure it, how to use a square to figure out all the angles that you needed, and so on. This is true all the way back to the Middle Ages and ancient times in Sidlani, but that's another subject. So there aren't any plans. What I'm really trying to say is there are basically no plans from this period. The closest we came to finding such plans was this image, which we're still trying to track down. It's the one in the bottom here, which you can see it's kind of cut off on the end. This has an interesting subject, interesting story in itself, in that it belonged to the Engineering Society as I think this is right, in New York City, which eventually folded, went out of business. The image was moved to an archive, which nobody can find right now. We're still looking for this thing, but that's a rarity to even have such a thing. Generally speaking, the boats that came in the canal were actually, this is something we're trying to parse out right now. The early type of boats that showed up in the canal were boats that were already in use, which makes sense. I mean, the canal was built, as you know, in different sections, different parts were finished at different times and so forth. And virtually, people were throwing anything in that would float and using it and using up, going 2 miles, 10 miles, 5 miles, whatever, moving about. So it's not surprising to find that a lot of the early boats were bateaux, what some people refer to as kind of the 18th century pickup truck, or just a flat bottom boat about 27, 28 feet long, double-ended, which could be rowed, poled, and sometimes even sailed. So a lot of those boats kind of showed up in the canal, moving from one place to another. There were skiffs and barges. And if you look at some of the early drawings, and even particularly through the 19th century, there were a lot of boats that were just kind of like, you can imagine a farmer would have a kind of a flat bottom barge of some kind of carry a horse across or whatever, and he'd sort of throw that in. There were also Durham boats, which you'll see an example of, and one of which we built for Lockport. There were also boats from the coast, from the coast and river craft. As you know, this whole area of upstate New York was filled in primarily by people from New England and also people from foreign countries, but primarily from New England originally, and they brought with them the skills that they had. They knew how to build a boat for the coast around Gloucester, Massachusetts. They might well build that boat and use that on the canal. And finally, of course, there was a lot of connection with Europe, and particularly, and I think this is underestimated by a lot of people, the connection with, particularly with the Netherlands. We had the Holland Land Company. We had a lot of Dutch people and Dutch descendants living in this area. So it's not surprising to find some influence of Dutch watercraft. There are a lot of questions regarding, and particularly when you're doing an interpretation of a historic boat. I mean, we can't claim that we're building an exact replica because we don't know what the original looked like specifically. If you find a sunken ship and you can take the lines off of it and so forth, and you can actually replicate, you can actually call that a full replica. So what we're doing and what we are kind of condemned to do is to build a boat that is as close as possible to the kind of boat that would have been used by DeWitt Clinton, and to be careful, at least not to violate any of the ideas or things that we know for sure are correct. For example, we know what the length of the boat was. We know what the beam of the boat was. Okay, you can't violate that. So the information that we have has to have to form the parameters around which the boat is built. Inside of that, there's a lot of issues that need to be interpreted. And I want to go in through some of the issues of how we do that. For one, I mean, this chief engineer model is an interesting example, because that's a boat that we know actually existed. The model is rather crude, but one could build that boat and probably be pretty close to how the original was done. The same with this Empire of Troy, which was a later boat. These are just models. But you run into issues like this, and these are two examples of interpretation. And this is generally true. You find this in historic preservation, architectural preservation as well. You have information that might be drawn or recorded by someone who was, to be kind, to say naive, or sometimes inept, or just not maybe have eye problems with their eyesight or whatever. Anyway, so what do you do with these kinds of this? Sometimes these are eyewitnesses who are doing this, and what you have to do, or what you can do, I should say the positive side of this, is that you can, as with a child's drawing, say, well, what is it they actually saw? What was it they actually saw, even if they didn't know how to draw it? And one of the things that seems to be consistent in this, the same in architectural restoration and so forth, things that can be counted, usually you can be pretty sure of, like how many windows did that boat have? This boat has 5 windows. Okay, that's probably true. Okay, it had a flat top. Okay, that's probably true. Whether the proportions of this are correct, certainly whether the perspective is correct, is another issue. You notice also on the stern of this boat, when the man's standing here with the tiller, it has a kind of a rounded top of that transom. That's probably true. Okay, that's probably correct. The one down below, which was done in England as a Erie Canal commemoration plate to Staffordshire, China. God knows where this guy's head was or what he was thinking of. He's got a little jacuzzi here, room on the side, garden room. I mean, that's not true. But the double ender, the railings, the man standing at the back, the arched roof, those things probably are correct. So these are things where you have to make some judgments about what you're seeing and what is consistent with other kind of information you know. Now this is a good documentation of a packet boat from 1825. We know that because it's on this stock certificate for the canal. That doesn't mean it has a steam engine. That's just a stove inside. But again, you count the windows and notice that the roof has a kind of a barrel vault to it. It's also a double ender. It's got a point in the bow of the boat over here, and it's got a point that comes to a point in the stern of the boat. We know those things are true, and that there were boats that had those characteristics. It's very much like a bateau. Those are interpretive. Now look at this one. This is we went through literally hundreds of these. Every picture we could possibly find between the 1820 and 1840 or 1850 we looked at to try to get some general standard of how these boats were shaped and formed and their scale. This one, for example, the man blowing the horn here possibly for a lock. The windows, notice how the windows are spaced here. Others are not. Others are handled in a different way. The people riding up in front, the bow is fairly low. It has a transom stern instead of a pointed stern. You got to put that in the hopper. Here's another one. Notice the stern of this boat has this kind of wine glass stern, which is very characteristic of ocean-going boats and dinghies, a small sailing craft, and so forth, with this kind of relatively crude box set on top of it, with windows on the end and solid in the middle. That tells you something. Like this was probably a cargo boat, not a packet boat. Incidentally, I should mention that a packet boat, it was a boat that carried mail. I mean, that's what packet boat means in general. They carry packets of mail. They ran on schedule, and on the Erie Canal, they had right-of-way over freight boats. So they could travel along at like 5 miles per hour, almost at a trot. And the other boats would have to drop their lines to let them pass. They would get passage through the locks and so forth. Much to the irritation of the canal. Yeah.
Is your creation of the Seneca Chief, is it going to have a bow knife on it?
Well, I mean, that's something we need to think about. That's one of the line people say that they had a knife on the prow, so that if someone left their line up, they would slide right through and cut it. And there were a lot of things to fight about on the Erie Canal, particularly when people were coming to the locks and so on. In fact, that almost became a kind of sub-profession of the canalers to fight it out, to solve their problems with fisticuffs. But we might add that, at least for a little color, if we have some competition. But one of the things and you can see, this is a Rochester early view. Notice this boat is a double ender, but it also has this peculiar bow on it. I mean, and that is a very strange thing. We've been trying to figure out what that is. If it was some kind of a cushion for ramming into things, or whether it was actually taking the bow and springing it back. There are Dutch boats that have this kind of configuration. Again, one could go into the kind of the origins of these forms, but the boat on the other side has a similar thing. But you notice how even in this picture, it tells you 3 horses are pulling this, that the Hoji is riding on the back horse. Sometimes he rides on the front horse. The packet boats oftentimes were pulled by 3 horses. Freight boats, oftentimes slow boats by just 1 or 2. But there's information in these images, even though they're crude. This is another one, a very tight close-up of an engraving. But again, you can see some interesting features of this. The idea of the cabin sort of sloping in from the sides, a slight crown in the cabin as it runs transversely here. Also, a little railing running down the middle, like a storage rack running down the middle of the boat that people are leaning up against. Oftentimes, too, you see in these images that people ride on top of the boat, which is something that the literature supports. That, and it must have been pretty cramped and pretty uncomfortable down below. So if the weather was not just horrible, they would get up on top of the boat. So that became a part of how these boats were designed. But here again, you can see the sides sloping in on this. There's a tight shot of this. And in this one, the slope on the sides of the cabin are such that when you get to the top of the cabin, it actually rounds off in a kind of an arch. There are examples of European boats that actually do that. It almost looks like it's almost a metallic roof. This is George Catlin, famous painter who's best known for his paintings of the American Indians in the last stages of the frontier. But he was on the Erie Canal in 1825 and did illustrations for the commemoration book of that. And this is his drawing of the Seneca Chief. Now you look at that and you think, oh, there it is. That's the boat you need to build. But there are a lot of anomalies here and this was also very, very small. So you have to even question a fine artist like Catlin for how exact he's trying to be. He's kind of using an oval swirl to kind of make the shape and the proportion of the boats. He's also doing some interesting things here that one can question of whether he's interested in giving you an exact image of that boat. Just writing Seneca Chief on there. This is going through the cut just north just west of Lockport. There's another version of this. In fact, after him, there are a lot of versions of this that people play around with that design. But you notice in that last one, he's got windows in the back. Well, there's no room there really for any space to do anything and to have any kind of room in there. It's just too low. But that is something that oftentimes the designers would do. It's the way the stern of a boat is supposed to look. So that's the way you're going to do it. And you see in this one, it's blotted out. The same image. This is an interesting picture because this contemporary, near contemporary image of the wetting of the waters in New York Harbor. And look at the size of these packet boats over on the side. I mean, you can just count the windows. It tells you how much bigger they are than the original boat that we looked at. These are probably, some of these are maybe close to 90 feet. Here's a close-up of that. And these would have been drawn down the canal by steamboats. Once they got to Albany and they're lowered into the Hudson River, then steamboats would pick them up and draw them down to New York Harbor. Again, some more of these images. This is notice the rocker, or the kind of the curve in the roof here. This one up in the Van Rensselaer here. Again, very high prow. The fact is that there are a number of different versions of these boats. It did not seem to be a standard boat that dominated. Here now, you talked about that knife on the front. Look at the bow of this one. And now this was a book that was published in about 1850, but it was certainly within the range of people would know. The illustrator here, Doppler, would have known what an Erie Canal Packet boat looked like when he illustrated that. But it has this almost like a gooseneck coming back, which some people suggest was probably had the blade on it. This painting done around the 1830s is probably what most later illustrators and so forth sort of accept as being kind of the standard, or what we now think of as kind of the standard packet boat shape. And again, the people, this is outside of Pittsburgh, near Rochester, but our boat is going to look something like that. This is a painting actually done in the late, probably 1880s, but the painter by the name of Henry was very meticulous in his historical research and other paintings that he did of this era, and kind of nostalgic paintings that he did. So this is another kind of situation. Well, if you've got an obsessive historical painter doing something like this, he probably did his research. He was probably careful about what he did and what he depicted. And certainly at the time he was alive, derelict boats like this could well have been around, or when he was a boy, and so forth. So this is a believable design, despite the fact that it was a late date boat. There are a number of models too that have shown up. This is a friend of mine had this model for many years. The model on the bottom here, and it's very similar to a boat that was done, the one on top, which was done about 1820, that came from one of the canals in Connecticut. And again, one has to remember that people were moving back and forth, despite the fact that they were slogging their way through the frontier, and the canal was kind of opening up. People were moving back and forth. I mean, it was a lot of people from New England, particularly New England, were coming up the Erie Canal. People were going back and forth. People who were building boats on the East Coast ended up in the middle of the country, and then moved on to Ohio canals and to the Chicago Canal, and moved westward. So there was a lot of fluidity of information, and so we can get information from even a model like that if it wasn't from actually from the Erie Canal itself. This is a kind of an intriguing model, which is in the Independent Seaport Museum in Philadelphia, which I'm still trying to track down some more detailed information on it. But the model shows even how the interior is handled. I mean, it's like a little dollhouse. But it belonged to, it was on the Delaware Canal. And also later, I mean, after the main height of the canal period, which ended around the middle of the 1850s, by the time of the Civil War in Virginia and the other canals, everybody was imitating the way things were done on the Erie Canal. So there's a lot of information even after photography finally comes in. And incidentally, this is a major issue. We don't have photographs of those early boats like the Seneca Chief, because photography, and particularly the daguerreotype, which was the most popular public form of photography, doesn't really come until the 1840s. So that's why we have to rely on these drawings and images. I just want to say a couple of things about European influence, and again, focus on the fact that there were intimate and direct connections between the Erie Canal builders and European influences. I mean, in fact, a number of the Erie Canal builders went back and forth to Europe. They knew about the English canals. They were much smaller, of course, and very short relative to the gigantic project that was going on in America. But they looked at those boats. How did they build boats with it? How did they build locks? We were trying to get as much information as we possibly could from anywhere and everybody else. So in Europe, there was a long tradition of boxing in boats, particularly river boats. In London and Paris, this is from Paris in the 18th century. Looks a lot like a canal boat. This is Venice. This is a very similar kind of canal boat in which they built a cabin on a boat. The pilot in the stern and so forth. Boats like this would have been poled or would have actually been rowed rather than pulled by mules. But what's really intriguing when you look at what the Dutch were doing from the middle of the 17th century, the 18th century, and the early 19th century, there were all kinds of examples of canal boats, what they called a trekschuten, which means which is a hauled boat, and you see some of these. I mean, these look suspiciously like Erie Canal boats. There's Napoleon kind of waving to somebody. Look at the one over here on the left here. These were boats that were hauled sometimes by a single horse, oftentimes by people. And you see images of women, women hauling a boat along the canal. With taking their vegetables to market and so forth. This is from 1778. A view in Leiden, trekschuten in Leiden. Look at lined up here, just like Erie Canal Packet boats. And look at this boat here. I mean, if you got the windmill out of there, you'd have a New York State scene. The interiors of these boats also look very suspiciously like the canal boats. Man on his laptop here. See, everybody's just discovering this. Oh, what's he doing there? Anyway, that's a 18th century. Here's a 19th century version of that. So to summarize this, I mean, after looking through hundreds of these boats, if you look over an upper left-hand corner, these are roughly what the shapes are, what the proportions of the shapes of the boats are. And down below here, I did a kind of a breakdown of the alternative arrangements of the cabin. And there are really only a handful of these, but there is some variety. These are packet boat profiles of the bow. And you can see there's quite a bit of variety there, from almost like a Viking ship here to a kind of a low profile bow to an actually just a simple plumb stem. The sections of the cabins, again, these are interpreted from drawings and engravings. And then the stern of the boat, which is always it's kind of like it's an area where the boat builder has a chance to sort of express himself a little bit beyond necessity, what kind of stern he wants to put on this, what kind of flare, what it curves, and so forth. And again, there's quite a bit of variety in those. So armed with all of that, we decided that we needed to kind of develop actual plans for a boat. So we had quite a few specifications. We went to Steve Dazel is a very significant naval architect who's done a lot of historical work, and we had them draw up plans for a boat. Here's the computerized version of that. Satisfying all of the kind of the dimensions that we were concerned with. And of course, at this time, as I mentioned, we had the boat at about 65 feet, and then came across this sheet of paper. I've got it here somewhere. Was that, oh no, it's 10 feet longer than that. But nevertheless, so from that information, they did a set of lines plans. And this, in any boat design, this is really the most critical piece, because this gives you literally the shape of the hull. And that gives you something that you can use for actually constructing or building the boat. We're not going to pace it off the way probably the traditional builders did. We had to be very exact about it. We needed to know exactly how much lumber it's going to cost. We had to be able to do all the kind of modern financial projections before we kind of really got into this. So what happened was that in somewhere in the middle of all of this, we made contact with Pete Welsby, who was working with Lockport and working with Dave Kenyon with the organization that was doing the restoration of the locks and Lockport, and they had a prospect for a grant to pay for building a canal boat. So we had been trying to get Buffalo to do this, and we hadn't gotten people really fired up about it yet. So we said, well, gee, let's do it for Lockport. Lockport's interested. Let's go with this. And so they actually funded the naval architect's plans for this. So we went ahead and got the plans done and so forth. And then the funds did not come through for various reasons. You know, these things happen to actually build the boat, but we had the plans. And so in the interim, we took boats, some bateaux, which we had built earlier for a War of 1812 reenactments. We sent those up for the Flight of Five. So as they're building the Flight of Five, they wanted some boats in the locks to give it some authenticity, to actually look like they were more than just filling up a tub of water. They actually had boats that could go up and down. So these two boats became elevator cars for a while. And then we decided, and we working with them, we got enough funds to build a more durable boat called the Durham boat, which was an early kind of boat that was used on the canal. Durham boat was again, they would go up to 40, 50 feet. They were quite large boats. We built one, a 55-foot boat called the Erie Traveler. This was a boat that, when Washington crossed the Delaware, the boats that he used to cross the Delaware in the American Revolution were Durham boats. They were big flat boats, double-ended, could carry an enormous amount of material. They use them for raw materials, carrying raw materials and so forth, but also for soldiers and trade on all of the rivers. They could be poled, they could be sailed, they could be rowed, they could be towed. It was basically a very practical kind of barge. And we actually had some plans for those. So we said, let's build one of these. So we got people from Lockport and from Buffalo together. We had, this is only part of them. We started out with about 35 volunteers to help do this. And a large piece of what we're involved with is community participation. We're not just building these boats to build the boats. We're trying to get people engaged with it, get them involved with them, get them tied into the subject and buying into the canal and buying into the boat building process and so on. So we started out with about 35, and I think we ended up with actually 10 more after we spent a year doing this. We launched that boat at Lockport, and it's now in the canal, but this is the gang building of it. I think it was about half of the people came from Lockport. They drove down from Lockport. This is putting in what's called the whiskey plank, the very last plank that goes into the boat. And then we launched that in the lock, the Flight of Five. This is the restored lock on the Flight of Five. And there she is today. Although there's no water in it yet, I don't think. Anyway, but so this gave us a chance to cut our teeth on building a boat of this scale. The other boats we'd built have been around 25 feet and under. So this is a 55-foot boat. We had a good management team. We knew how to put it together. We had the master carpenters and master boat builders that guided us through this. So we turned back to Buffalo and back to the idea that let's build this in Buffalo. Look what we've done. Look what we can do. We'd gotten a lot of publicity from this other boat, and it seemed like pulling teeth for a while. There were all kinds of issues about the waterfront development, trying to bring in. Well, there were some people who thought the waterfront ought to be a kind of a shopping center, kind of have a Bass Pro, and there were others saying no. And including us, no, it really needs to have a historic theme. We need to build the waterfront around its role as a historic on a historic theme. The Erie Canal, the connection of the East Coast to the West, and so forth and so on. So anyway, we wrote a number of articles and so forth, and we had a very good friend at the Buffalo News who bought our idea of the Erie Canal and our image of how the canal, a canal boat, we needed a canal boat to kind of focus some of the identity of the city on the canal. Now we're looking at this is what the Buffalo Harbor looked like mid-century. This is the commercial slip, which I showed you in the early slide. And this building right here was one of a number of buildings that was on that site, right on the south corner of where the Erie Canal comes into the Buffalo River, which is ultimately Lake Erie. So we had made proposals about building this boat. We wanted to build the Erie Canal boat. We wanted to build it in public. We wanted the public to be engaged in it. We wanted to have volunteers work on it. And then we wanted to keep the boat as a kind of a kiosk for the rest of the for the rest of the theme of the canal area, but also then use it on the canal. So we were promoting that idea. The Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, which was in controlling this land, said, well, maybe you could do a temporary building, build the boat, then get it in the water, then get it out of here, and we'll use this for other kinds of development. So we looked at this site and where could we possibly put a boat building there. It took a year and a half of sort of playing around with this. And then a rather miraculous thing happened. We had been writing these articles. The newspaper had been supporting this. The newspaper had done a number of articles saying that this is a great idea. Let's get behind this. This is part of Buffalo's identity and so forth. We were approached by a man walked into the shop one day, said he was interested in the Erie Canal. We thought, this is great. This is great. What do you have on your mind? And long story short, he said, I'll pay for that boat. And this was David Rogers. You see him on the left there. He's a very interested in history. He's a longtime Buffalonian. He said, let's build that boat. So all of a sudden, I mean, our jaws dropped, you know, it's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? You know, after all this struggling we've been going through, he said, yeah, let's do this. So once we had that, and this is sort of a lesson in how things work, I guess, in the real world, once we had his donation or commitment to pay for the boat, all of a sudden, all the doors opened up. It was like the resistance we had gotten from, or the reluctance, I should say, from Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation. Is this a good idea? You really want to build a boat? Who's going to look at the boat? Who wants a boat? Who cares about the Erie Canal? All of that kind of business. Suddenly, it was like, okay, this is good. Somebody likes this. Maybe there are other people that like this idea. So long story short, the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation says, you were talking about doing this temporary building. We don't want a temporary building. If we're going to do something down there, let's do it right. Let's build a real building. So they actually, this is some of our early drawings suggestion of what this might look like. And this was an alternative for building it over some existing ruins down there. And kind of some of our planning schemes for how big the boat building needed to be and so forth to do the job. So they agreed to do this. They hired the Hamilton Houston Lowney local architectural firm to design the building. And then of course we had to go through all of the issues of permits and getting the inspectors and so forth to agree that this was possible to do and so forth and so on. There were a lot of kind of politics and behind the scenes discussions and other articles and so forth. But again, long story short, they approved of it. They said, yes, let's do this. And so they produced a building that we are, and this is now under construction, in which we're going to be building the Seneca Chief. It's going to come out here, it's going to be launched here, and it's going to be tied up here eventually. And this is now the new, this is now kind of the new focal point of the harbor development. And what's really wonderful about this is that this is the sacred site. That's where the East Coast meets the Midwest, right there. So the building, I mean, I couldn't have dreamed of having the building in a better place. I mean, believe me, we've done plans for having such a building all up and down the 80 miles of Erie County waterfront. And here it is. So this is going to be a key point, a key focal point of the harbor. And here's the building under construction right now. Well, it's actually a little bit later than that. They've covered that. It's a little bit beyond that. That was done a few months back. But this is the building. It's roughly like the boat. It's kind of in the spirit of the building that was originally there. These bridges are correct representations of the kind of bridges that ran across the canal. So we're now beginning to build up, even with our building, this ambiance of the canal, the canal site. So anyway, that's under construction right now. And if you want a Corona-free trip, you can drive over there and take a look at it. Get out of your car even with the winds blowing and see what's going on. But that is supposed to be finished by, well, it was originally supposed to be done in July. It looks like it's going to be somewhat delayed, but we think it's still, at this point, the building's going to be finished in September, and we'll be able to start actually building in the building in September. But again, you know, we don't know. I mean, this could all be delayed. All right, now building the boat itself, a key, what are we doing on time here? Okay, I've got a few minutes here. All right, building the boat itself, when we started, we had the lines plans. And I should say also, our friends at Lockport graciously agreed to partner with us, and actually the plans that they had paid for let us build this boat in Buffalo. So that is really wonderful. That was a wonderful gift in itself, rather than having to go back and to and to do a new design and redesign it and so forth. So this is really one of many partnerships that we've been developing as we're moving along in this, because the Erie Canal, this packet boat and the kind of programming the packet boat is really not just about Buffalo, but it's about the whole canal. And you can imagine that this, when we take this boat on tour, it's going to stop at all of these places, and we'd like as many people along the line to claim it as possible. So this is what we had, the plans for the boat. And so what you have to do in order to construct the boat, to have the patterns and so forth necessary for cutting out the wood and so forth, you have to take those plans and you have to draw them up full size, which is called lofting in the boat building world. You literally draw the side of the boat and the top of the boat on top of one another, and with the places where those lines intersect, you can build the frames that give the boat its lateral shape. So we built this table, the longest table in Western New York. It's about 65 feet long. It's 10 feet short of what it needs to be, but the center sections are the same, so we can simply double that. And here they are laying that out with lasers, something they didn't have in the old days. But they're laying out that pattern, and that boat will be drawn. It'll look something like this. Here's the top of the boat there, and here's the side of the boat here. Those are set on top of one another. And where you find these intersections here, you can then draw what are the sections of the boat, the ribs of the boat, or the frames of the boat. So that's going on right now. That's pretty close to being done. And the way that actually looks when you construct it, you end up with these things, what are called these half sections here. And like that section right here can now be taken off. We do this with paper and then make a pattern out of that, drag it over here, and you can cut a pattern from that, which you can then use over here to cut the original of the wood, the actual wood that's going in the boat. And from that, you make the frame, and then that frame goes, when you build a strong back here and the keel, you set those up. And when those are all set up, this is a very quick view of that, like this, okay, you then, and fill in all those frames, and this is what it's actually going to look like when we get the number, that's a cutaway, the total number of frames that go in here. Then you're ready to plank the boat. So we will then, and this will all be done in the shed. So what we're doing is we're doing this part here, and we're starting to do some of this. And when we get the building in September, we'll start doing this piece here. And then the next stage is to plank the boat. And finally to plank it, do the cabin, and then do the finishing, and then throw the people in there. So that's essentially the process that we're in right now, and where we are right now. And then, as I said, when this is all done, which will be, our plan was to do it in about 2.5 years. So we will finish well ahead of the bicentennial. And our plan is to launch the boat at canal, the commercial slip, and then take it down the canal and basically work the canal, the whole length of the canal. And the idea being, the boat as a kind of a show boat will carry exhibitions and demonstrations and so forth about the canal, and hopefully with this as a vehicle, we can excite people in other towns, even the small towns, little places like Gasport and so on, get them involved in the Erie Canal bicentennial. All of these towns have, and I've been checking on these and trying to contact these, all have their own historical societies and so on, their own civic groups and so forth. And we would like to actually encourage other people to even think about building maybe even smaller versions of canal boats, but basically to bring back the idea and the currency of the canal itself. So that's where we are right now. And I should say, in terms of the research that we're doing, if anybody has any pictures that I haven't seen, I'd love to see them, or any information, or if you happen to say, oh, my great-great-great-great-grandfather was a canal boat builder and he left these tools and these notes and so forth, we are anxious to collect that information. And I'm sure the Canal Museum is, the Canal Museum in Syracuse is anxious to do that. But this is all information we all need to share and kind of put this picture back together again. So anyway, if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them. And one day we'll be doing this. Whoever the governor, when we do the 2025 bicentennial celebration or commemoration, we would like to lobby to get the governor, whoever he or she may be in 2025, to take the trip. It'd take about 5 days or so. They can fly in and out if they have to. But this is an opportunity for the whole state of New York to do a little jingoistic patriotism of its own. So anyway, any questions maybe I can answer? Do you have some of those?
Let's see. On the topic of the grand celebration, I know our director wants us to recreate the cannonade that went from Buffalo to New York City and back. That's a fun one.
Oh yeah, the cannons?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's
yes, no, I think that's something. No, I think we should do that. We should definitely do that. And you know, that has so many important, significant implications. You know, sitting on the dock down in New York City, when those cannons went off from Buffalo, boom, 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 down to New York City, Samuel F.B. Morse, a very famous painter at the time, was sitting on the dock and he hears this, said, you know, there's something to this. You could send messages this way. And of course, he invents the Morse code, and then within a few years, the electron, you know, and you have the telegraph. So, I mean, that's just one of the many kind of little side effects of the canal, which are wonderful. And in fact, they even figured they timed it. How long did it take them to shoot? You know, about 20 minutes, I think it took for the message to get. That's what they figured. But there are a lot of little nuances like that that we can get. And what I would like to see is I'd like to see this inspire other people to kind of dig into some of these other aspects of this, because they're just enormous, rich sort of historical field there for people to get excited about.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't look like we have many questions. A lot of people are very excited about the project, and I can't wait to see it in the Inner Harbor of Syracuse someday.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe we can get them to dig up Erie Boulevard. That could be a goal.
Yeah. Yeah, someone said we should refill parts of the canal. We'll see about that one.
No. Well, listen, we got to save the canal. That's another thing that I think needs to be kind of linked into this whole upcoming bicentennial. Is that the canal? This is a precious artifact, but it's useful and it has a future. And just you know, more than just a bike path. And if we can get various watercraft plying the canal again, you know, there are just a lot of possibilities for this that I'd like to see new entrepreneurs get involved with.
Yes. Someone does have a question here. Will there be any propulsion besides a mule?
No. Well, actually, that's good that you bring that up, because what we are going to do is we're going to have a tug, and we will use the tug, and we're kind of negotiating now with that. We're looking for something appropriate size and hopefully classic to take it around, because the Erie Canal actually doesn't, as you know, there's no towpath that goes right to downtown Buffalo right now. So to get it out of there, it has to be towed in some fashion. But there are long sections of the canal, and I'm inspired by this. I've been riding on my bike. I've gone down the canal in a boat back and forth, but I wasn't paying attention about towpaths at the time. But the bike path is a useful towpath, and there are long sections of the canal where the boat could be pulled by, well, this would have been done with horses, three gray horses, at least for DeWitt Clinton. And what is a possibility is kind of an event possibility is actually having some of those 10, 15, 20 mile sections pull up with horses for that length of that period. So you could really have a serious, authentic experience of what the canal was like. There's some areas where it's difficult to do that, like too many bridges and so forth and so on. But that's a very, very real possibility, and I think it would certainly give a unique, the ultimate in museum interactive displays for somebody to get on a real canal boat to move at real canal boat speed along, you know, the genuine canal.
Yeah, that'd be
Incidentally, a woman actually contacted us a short time ago, and she says, "Are you interested in draft horses?" She said, "You know, doing this." I said, "Yes, yeah. What do you know about that?" She says, "Well, I have a draft horse rescue. I have a draft horse rescue farm." And he says, "I have a lot of draft horses. Let me know." And I said, "Well, we were interested in how the harnessing was done and all of that kind of business." She said, "Well, you know, I know all that stuff." So, so when the time comes, I think we'll be. I think they get the horses from the Amish or other, you know, draft horses, bring them back to life, and so that's a real possibility. And to have somebody that you could even take the horses and, you know, meet me in Gasport, you know, and the boat meets them there, and they hook them up to the horses and take them up to Middleport or whatever. So, so there are a lot of fun things that can emerge out of this.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Well, thank you very much, John, for taking the time to tell us about this really exciting project. And thank you, everybody watching. You can tune in next week.
I want to encourage people to see the other shows here, because there's a lot of information out there to be shared.
Yes, that's for sure. Next week we'll be talking about we have the artifacts of an old barge canal cook. So we're going to be jumping 100 years ahead in history next week. But that should be a very interesting talk. And we will post this on YouTube later today. I think some people are still having audio issues, but thank you.
Read my lips. Okay.